Upcoming episodes on the Flying Monkey podcast. Country music artist Grant Malloy Smith. Three-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Cage. Actor-musician, the one and only Chris Mulkey. Father's rights advocate Robert Garza. And new episodes of Parent Stories. Go to flyingmonkeypodcast.com and select your favorite social media site to join us. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble. Okay, well, welcome back to the Flying Monkey podcast. This is our segment called Learning Theory with Dr. Bill. How you doing today, Dr. Bill?
Very good. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for coming on again. This next segment is sponsored by hopeanddarkness.me and stoptheabuse.info. We had talked a little bit about learning theory the last time we had John. So we had mentioned on the podcast for parents who have questions or are going through parental alienation and problems like that with their children, they could send in a message. So we got a couple. And so I was going to kind of see if I could just kind of throw out their questions to you and we can, maybe delve into it and see what we can help them figure out something or at least understand it, if not solve their problem. So we had a father from Colorado, and he sent a message saying that he only gets to see his child once every other week. And when the child, he comes to him or he picks him up and they start their visitation, the child's really aggressive and disrespectful. And it takes a long time for, almost the entire time they're together, towards the end is when they start to get along or the child seems to warm up to him. So he was really curious as why is that happening and what could he do?
Well, I'll take the second part of your question is the explanation. We're talking about what's commonly known as parental alienation, which I call domestic violence by proxy, which I think is a little more accurate. And so a child, basically, like all people, they live and learn in specific spaces. All behavior basically is learned in a specific location. So if you have a child who's expressing the kinds of behaviors you're talking about, which is aggression, anger, kinds of behaviors that would be associated with what we would call angry behavior, those behaviors are a function of learning, like all behaviors. All behavior is a function of learning. And because you've got a situation where the child is spending the majority of their time with one parent, then that parent, if that parent is involved in activities that would basically essentially train the child to express attachment issues, which might be having the child express anger or conform to that parent's expectations, which might be that parent has specific conflicts and confrontational issues with the other parent. And so the child essentially is conforming to the expectations. The way that behavior is controlled and trained is through consequences. So the child becomes very much aware, like any animal or any person, of consequences for not conforming to the expectations of that parent. So the child basically is spending, let's say, 2 weeks, a lot of time, day in and day out, conforming to this pattern of behavior that's being trained. And so when the child arrives at the father's house, the child has what we call an expectation conflict. And what that means is that there's a different expectation for the father than there is for the mother. And the child who's caught in a situation where the child is feeling extreme discomfort. What is discomfort? Is a consequence of frustration. And it's also when a child expresses discomfort, there is stress. So what accounts for the stress? It's that the child is caught or trapped between two stages of learning, which we call awkwardness and adaptation. Child is vacillating back and forth between feeling awkward or uncomfortable and trying to adapt to it, because basically all behavior moves in one direction towards comfort. The child can't jump that threshold over to comfort, so the child's trapped, moving back and forth between trying to adapt, not being successful, and then feeling discomfort again. So this is what the dad is seeing when the child arrives at his house. He's seeing this child who basically has extreme discomfort, is not able to reconcile that discomfort, And maybe over the period of the weekend, there's enough time and enough contact between the father and the son. Of course, this is different in every single case. There's a lot of mitigating factors, which I don't know about. But if you say that the child warms up to the father over the weekend, well, it's probably a good thing. It's a good sign. Because children basically, once they have an attachment for another parent, that attachment's there for life. So the child's basically able to express affection or is friendly, engages with the father for part of the weekend. And then what we often see in situations like this is just before the child leaves to go back to the other parent, we have what is also a learning theory concept called anticipation. And anticipation means the child basically is always aware that there is a next step. And the next step is on the return. There may be also an expression of discomfort at that time as well. So we see this in a lot of kids. So on their arrival, they're expressing extreme discomfort, and on the time that they leave, that parent after the visitation, they begin to express that discomfort again. And basically what they're doing is they're gearing up to readapt to the expectations of the parent that is basically involved in training them to express these awkward behaviors. So that's what's going on. That's the explanation side. Now, you asked me how to solve the problem. It's because of the limited time, there are limited options. Obviously, the court is enabled the situation through ordering this kind of a visitation or custody arrangement, which is not in the interest of the child at all. It's only maintaining the behavior, and it's giving the child the time to practice these maladaptive behaviors by going back and spending long periods of time that are interrupted only by a very short period of time with the father. So what you have is something we also talk about in learning theory. It's called spatial conditioning, which is where the space that the child lives in comes to have stimulus control over the behavior of the child in such a way that the behavior becomes highly predictable. So you've got a little boy who is in a very difficult situation. And he's been placed in that situation by probably the court, perhaps mental health input, because that's who informs the court. And most all of these custody decisions were basically over the last 50 years a result of mental health input. These people do not understand this problem. They're in a different total, like a different science completely from the learning theory and motivational field that I happen to occupy. So I have a vastly different lens to look at this. And so if you want to solve the problem, you have to understand spatial conditioning. And obviously, since space, anytime we leave a space, it's just that we're familiar with, we have to go through a process which is called adaptation. Adaptation meaning we're moving towards what we're trying to do is adapt to something that's unfamiliar, which is uncomfortable. So we want to get back to a feeling of comfort. So if you want to change the behavior of the child, you have to really consider, and I don't have time to go into it today, but you'd have to consider spatial conditioning, the role that that plays, and how to use that as a strategy to be able to quickly, not over weeks and months and years, but you can very quickly change behavior if you understand the principles of learning and how spatial conditioning can be used to bring about a rapid change in helping the child and exploiting the child's vulnerabilities to be able to help that child to adapt and restore a strong affection and adaptive behaviors that you would expect between a father and a son. So that it's a matter of both time and space.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. So, um, again, I want to thank you for coming on today, Dr. Bill. It's always a great experience and an eye opener talking to you and learning about this. And we're definitely going to continue this series of talk. So each week we'll have more. So for those of you folks who have a question regarding parental alienation or a problem with your child, with them rejecting you or being cruel or bad behavior, again, you can go to flyingmonkeypodcast.com and click on Ask Dr. Bill and send us a message and your questions, and we'll answer it on one of the upcoming episodes. And again, this I want to thank our sponsors, hopeanddarkness.me and stoptheabuse.info. And we'll look forward to talking to you again next week, Dr. Bill. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Flying Monkey podcast. Like, follow, and subscribe to our social media sites on Facebook, X, YouTube, Rumble, TikTok, and Truth Social. You can also go straight to our webpage at www.flyingmonkeypodcast.com.